But again, I just want to thank you for not only your interest in this Equipping the Local Church grant, but more importantly, thank you for your leadership, for your heart, for your passion, for sharing your faith and the love of Jesus with your neighbors. So as we get started, let me go ahead and share my screen, and we will work through our material. Let me get, okay. Let my slideshow. There we go. All right, can everybody see that? Good. All
Yes.
right. Wonderful. Well, again, my name is Heather Lear. I have the privilege of serving as the Vice President for Grants at the Foundation for Evangelism. And I'm joined by Terry Farmer, who's working in the background, who helps me with everything grants at the foundation. As you can see here on the slide, for those of you that might be unfamiliar with the Foundation for Evangelism, in 2024, we entered our 75th year. Up until about 12 or so years ago, well, we started as a funding arm focusing on evangelism, equipping laity, clergy, local churches for what was the Methodist Church, became the United Methodist Church, and again, about 12 years ago, became independent. So we're excited now that not only the grants that we're awarding, but our board is representative of denominations across the Wesleyan Church family. And I know all of you here today represent various branches of our Wesleyan family. So we're excited to have you with us. Just a little bit more about the Foundation for Evangelism. As I said, this is our 75th year, and throughout our time, our history, the primary mission and vision for us has to be a catalyst to equip disciples to share the good news of Jesus Christ. And currently we do that in three primary ways. The first is raising up gospel leaders. That's providing solid evangelism training to those in leadership positions. Historically, that looks like clergy formation, but with the changing landscape of leaders, we want to make sure that folks who are taking all different training pathways have that access to solid Wesleyan evangelism training. We also are really focused on engaging the ministry of the laity. The Foundation for Evangelism was founded by and for primarily lay folks. Because those of you who are laity, especially, thank you for being on this call, but pastors come and go. Laity are the ones who are in the community with the relationships and are so important as the priesthood of all believers. And what we're here today is to look at our Equipping the Local Church grant focus area. So just a little more about these grants. We realized that a lot of times the smaller local churches have the passion and the energy and the relationships in their community to really make a difference, but don't necessarily have the finances to try something or start a new ministry or an experiment. So that's what these grants are geared towards, being that catalytic little influx of funding to allow smaller churches to help really start something new and create an evangelism focused culture in their local church. Let me keep going here. So as we get to the nuts and bolts of these grants, I appreciate all of you when you registered who submitted your questions in advance. I had an opportunity to look over those and think I have built answers for them into this presentation. If, as we get to the end, there's still a lingering question that you have or something that I said raises additional questions, you can put that in the chat or Q&A. Terry's going to be monitoring that for us, and at the end I'll have time to address those. So hopefully I'll address them as we go, but if there's anything lingering, you have that available. As you can see, if you've got the full screen up, we're over 230 participants right now. So we won't have time to unmute and to ask questions that way, but that will be your way to get clarification. So who qualifies for this grant? As I mentioned, we are a Wesleyan Tradition Foundation, and so those churches, those ministries who can trace their roots back to the ministry of John and Charles Wesley are those that qualify. And we've got two different categories for grants. The first is the smallest local churches. Those are, and we say participating, 1 to 99, so under 100, including those virtually attending, as some folks still are hybrid. And then we've got those grants are $5,000. And then we have for the 100 to 250 people, that's our medium size grants. Again, those are $10,000. That can be a medium-sized church or a cluster of smaller congregations, maybe in a district or in a town working together on a ministry program. Also, we've had some folks who are Wesleyan Tradition organizations who are partnering with these smaller churches. I received an inquiry actually earlier today asking about campus ministry as an example. And while we're not funding campus ministries, if local churches are starting a college ministry or want to do something that's based in the local church, connecting with local colleges and universities, something like that could be a partnership that would qualify for the local church grant. And at this time, all of the churches and organizations need to be based in the United States. We do have a couple other global partnerships and initiatives, but this Equipping the Local Church grant currently is just for US-based churches. So again, the flip side, who doesn't qualify? So non-Wesleyan tradition churches or organizations. We don't fund mission trips or kind of one-time events or a service project. So there might be elements of what you're looking to do that includes events, but what we're looking is this is a year-long grant. So it's a more relationship building over the year. And it's also their evangelism grants. So it's relationship building that hopefully leads to invitation to discipleship with folks and for them to come and be part of your congregation. As I mentioned, a campus ministry by itself doesn't qualify. We also aren't funding established or ongoing ministry projects. We want this money to enable you to try something new and to experiment. And I'll talk more about what that looks like. No capital improvements or buildings. If there are items that you need, whether it's some technology items or something like that, to facilitate the program, that can be written in, but this isn't to subsidize your budget or to pay bills. So again, additional staffing does not qualify either. And like I said, all of the groups that are funded are denominationally affiliated or nonprofits with that 501c3 status. So let's talk as specifically about the grants. As I mentioned, there's two different award amounts, the $5,000 level and the $10,000 level. And folks are asking how many grants are available. We'll have about 50 total combined between the two different amounts. Timeline for our process. Let me make this smaller so I can see the screen here. The grant cycle is currently open now. We opened January 15th. and it will close the end of February. Uh, During March and April is when we'll do our screening and reviewing and take our recommendations to our Board of Trustees. In May, you will receive notification as well as the expectation of what you'll need to do over the coming year and sign some agreements. The money will be distributed early June. And in July, I'll do orientation sessions to walk you through the year. I've done that. This is our third local church grant cycle. I've done it the last 2 years. And not only has it been good for folks to get information, it's been really fun for the recipients to hear from one another and to learn about the different projects. So I've enjoyed that, and I think they have as well. So we'll do that again this year in the July timeframe. Mid-November, we'll do a check-in via Zoom. Again, that's a time for folks to get together, to learn from one another, to see how things are going. Did they go as anticipated, or were there things they discovered along the way that they needed to make some tweaks and some pivots? A mid-program report will be due in December. And then in the spring, as you're finishing up, you'll be gathering your stories, and the final report will be due in June of 25. So it's a 12-month grant cycle. All right, so how do you go about applying? I think most of you received information about the grant cycle, it seemed like, from denominational or district communication. So you might have already checked out our website and discovered some of this. But as I said, we're accepting applications now. Our deadline is the end of February. We use an online platform for our grants called Submittable, and I'll show you what that looks like. But you'll need to create an account with Submittable in order to apply. That's the platform that holds our application. It's also the platform we use for our acceptance forms and our reporting. So it's kind of a one-stop shop for all the stuff you'll need to fill out in the coming year. And here is our website address where you can access Submittable. And so let me just show you. It's right here. Here's a screenshot, and I apologize. Our communications director is under the weather, and we noticed this today that it still says 23, but this is for 24. So when you go to foundationforevangelism.org and you hover over grants, you'll be able to see a drop down that says apply for grant. That'll take you to this page. Once you click on apply for this grant, that will take you to the Submittable platform. But before I show you that, let me just show you, if you were to scroll down on our website, on this web page, we have several different things that hopefully you'll find helpful. One is just some of the information I'm talking through right now as far as details, selection criteria, timelines, FAQs. Also, as you can see, we've got an application preview that you can click on and see all of the questions in advance before you even create that Submittable account and enter the platform. So encourage you to go ahead and look at that preview with your leadership team before you start tackling the actual application, if you find that helpful. So you'll have everything in front of you before you get started. So that is on our website. So on this page, again, if you click on the apply for a grant, that takes you to this Submittable landing page. And then once you're in here, you'll be able to create your account. Once you have an account, you'll be able to just sign back in. So let me talk you through a little bit about the features of Submittable that we like. Our first year, we had a different grant platform, and it there were some kinks and some things that didn't work well. So this is our second year with Submittable. And a couple things that we appreciate about this platform is, first, once you start your application, you don't have to do it all in one sitting. I've applied for some grants myself where you basically have to do it all in one sitting or you lose your work thus far. That isn't the case with this. So you can start it, answer a couple questions, come back. It also gives you the opportunity to collaborate. So once your application is open, let's say you're filling out the programmatic pieces, but somebody from your church can answer some of the financial questions. You can send them an invitation to collaborate on your application. So that will allow multiple people to work on it together. Also, because we give you the preview, if you wanted to just print that out and, make copies, and folks could handwrite their answers, and then you could fill it out yourself if you didn't want to collaborate or that was a little intimidating for folks. So that's the Submittable platform. If you have any questions or problems along the way, they have tech support people that can help you if you get stuck on something or you make a mistake or something happens. They have like a chat feature. So any technological issues go to them directly. If you have substance issues as far as your answers or things like that, feel free to reach out to Terry or me. But if you've got technology questions or concerns about the platform, go ahead and go directly to Submittable. Alrighty, so that is the platform. Now let me talk about what we're actually looking for. I'm going to give you the answer key ahead of time, so I don't want you to feel like you're trying to read our minds or anything like that. I'm going to tell you exactly what we're looking for in a successful grant application, and they align directly with the Foundation for Evangelism's values. And so the questions that I'm going to share right now, when we have folks review the grant applications, they have a scorecard, and these questions are on the sheet and they just rank kind of 1 to 5, like Likert scale. Did they answer this question? Is it not there at all? Is it not addressed? Or did they try to answer? It's kind of halfway. So you'll get like a 1 to 5 ranking on these questions. So make sure that as you're writing your proposal, you've thought through and addressed these, because this will give you the higher score. Okay. So our first value is we're the Foundation for Evangelism, evangelistic, the why. There's a lot of churches, organizations who do really great things in the community, but don't really necessarily ground it in the why. So how will this grant be grounded in and share God's story and invite others to enter, develop, and deepen their relationship with Jesus? So for us, Jesus is the why. And so how will whatever you're doing help people to know the why of what you're doing? And how are you helping even the folks in your church understand that being a disciple of Jesus is their why? And then this is also really important. Have you intentionally listened to your community to learn what difference the good news might make in their lives? So we are really looking for proposals that are responsive and built on relationships with those outside your walls. So there are a lot of great ministries out there, really interesting ideas, but they might not fit in your context. They might not speak to your neighbors, and they might not match the gifts of your congregation. So what we're looking for is not just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall, or we saw this other church tried this, and so we should try that. But what makes you think this is a good fit? Like how is this going to utilize your gifts and strengths that God is giving you to authentically share the love of Jesus with your neighbors? Um, Now, as I said earlier, this is an experiment. So we know that things happen, or you might have listened really well, but when you implemented, something just didn't quite click. That's okay. And you have permission to pivot. But an experiment is based on some sort of past research, or you have a hypothesis based on information, right? So we're looking for, how have you intentionally built relationships and landed at this particular project? And how is it, again, utilizing the gifts and strengths and even location, or other things that make your congregation unique? So not the church down the street might not, this might not be their thing, but why is it yours? Okay. Wesleyan. Um, and what we mean here, it's grounded in a more holistic approach. So a lot of times evangelism is seen in practice very transactionally. That's not Wesleyan. A Wesleyan tradition congregation that models their, that uses Jesus, and whom John Wesley modeled his approach after Jesus, intentionally connected the love of God and love of neighbor, right? They didn't just share faith, but they also sought to address physical needs, emotional needs, address systemic issues in society. So again, in what ways will this grant invite people to accept and grow in God's grace? And also, they invited folks into a lifetime of discipleship, not just to make a one-time decision, but to join the community of faith and continue on a path of sanctification. So again, it's addressing the whole person and community, and it's invitational into a life of discipleship. And you can see the asterisks there again, in response to the triune God's pursuit of us. That's that prevenient grace that goes before us. The Wesleyan Christianity is a lifelong journey to love God and neighbor with our whole heart. So Wesleyan. And so part of that too is, what are your current discipleship practices in your church? And if somebody says yes, are you ready for them? Do you have a way for them to really learn and be shaped in the faith? Our next value is steward. We're a foundation that tries to be good stewards, but we see that not only as stewardship of dollars, but as of gifts and people. So like I said, we're looking to see, how are you identifying and using your congregational gifts and strengths in this particular initiative to share the good news of Jesus. So we want to see that, as well as a report of how you're actually spending the money, the stewardship of dollars. And then, this one is important for us too. As I mentioned, laity is foundational to the foundation for evangelism. So we're really interested in shared leadership. How are clergy, ministers, and laity working in partnership together? So we will ask for not only buy-in, but what does it look like leadership team-wise for folks working together? Somebody can definitely be the point person on that, probably has to be. But how is this a collaborative effort? Many of the Wesleyan tradition denominations also we understand, are part of an appointment system. And so we've had churches over the years who apply for a grant and are selected, but there's a pastoral change in the summer. So it's even more important to have laity who are not only passionate about whatever this initiative might be, but are ready to take the lead and move forward. So part of that acceptance paperwork, we're going to ask for who are the clergy involved, and then who's a key lay person who will be a contact as well. So that's the leadership. And then we want this to be something that's part of the congregational culture. So how are you inviting others and raising up others in your congregation to lead and participate? Equip is our next value. So again, and this just dovetails on what I just said. So how will you equip and empower your congregation to participate in this initiative? So, and I'll give you a couple examples. I know a lot of you are asking, what do these grants look like, or can you give us some concrete examples? And I'll do that at the end. But there are several grants that we've funded that kind of on paper or at first glance, it seemed kind of a niche ministry. But these churches have found ways to get most of the congregation involved in some way. So how are you seeking to not make this just a little siloed ministry, but to get most of the congregation behind this initiative? And for us, we want to be a learning organization. And so we're really interested in process. So how did you come about this idea? What do you learn? What are you learning along the way? And what, not exactly the details of what you did, but the process of listening and learning and evaluating can then we glean from your work and share with others. So that's really important to us as well. Not necessarily the what you're doing, but the how and the why are things that can be shared. And then our final value is catalyst. So like I said, we understand resources can be limited in smaller churches. So we look at this funding as a way to spark ministry in your church. But then again, how will this spark energy and excitement and greater impact than had you not engaged in this activity? It's really interesting as folks have shared their stories, just the unexpected partnerships that have come about, or the people that kind of stepped up that they never thought would, or neighbors that are hearing about what they're doing and are getting excited and asking to come along. So how is this money helping to spark something and have a greater impact than had you not engaged in this work? So catalyst. All right. Now, the other thing that I wanted to share with you and to get you thinking about a little bit is, so we're going to, when you do these reports and you share, okay, this is what we actually did and this is how we spent our money. One of the things that we're really leaning into is, how do we not just measure busyness, but how do we look at kingdom impact and transformation that's happening, gospel transformation that is happening. And so one of our professors that we fund, who teaches evangelism, Mark Teasdale, he's written a book recently called Participating in Abundant Life, and we're using his work as a springboard to develop some new ways of thinking about metrics. I know a lot of your denominations probably require annual reports. You might have a charge conference or yearly forms you need to fill out that asks you to put in a bunch of different numbers and metrics. We're trying to think about that a little bit differently, and maybe a way that actually measures, again, transformation and not necessarily busyness. So we're framing that through the lens of abundant life. In John 10:10, Jesus says that he came to bring life and bring life abundantly. Well, what does that mean and what does that look like? Um, and so Dr. Teasdale, he based on Psalm 23 here and what the Good Shepherd does and offers, um, categorizes abundant life in 3 ways that are holistic. So the aspects are standard of living, so physical needs are being met. Um, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He leadeth me beside the still waters. So in Psalm 23, the shepherd is providing water and green pastures and the things that the sheep physically needs. So if we look at how Jesus engaged with folks, he cared about their physical needs. He fed people, he healed people, right? Um, that's not separated from evangelism, which a lot of times we have mission in one bucket and evangelism in the other. And part of sharing this abundant life in the gospel is addressing physical needs. So standard of living. The second area that we're looking at measuring is improving quality of life. So that's geared more towards the emotional and relational needs. Um, that involves hospitality, community building. So in what ways will your grant, your initiative provide belonging and support and invite people into community? We know, especially coming out of the pandemic, that loneliness is an epidemic. So how will your work help to give folks that sense of belonging and community? And then the final aspect of abundant life is meeting spiritual needs, eternal life. But forgiveness of sins, helping people to find their identity in Christ and life purpose, and of course assurance in the face of death, of that eternal life that is both now and forever. So what we're looking for is is your initiative, and this might expand your thinking, and hopefully it does a little bit. How are you addressing and presenting the fullness of life through your ministries and through the proposals that you are submitting? And we're going to invite you to actually create your own metrics in these areas. We're not going to give you set guidelines or tables that you need to fill in. From the beginning, from the outset of the implementation of your grant, we're going to have you go ahead and establish what you're going to measure, what you're going to look for, what's the transformation that you hope happens in these areas, and then track them at the 6-month and then year mark. All right, so let me just share a couple grant stories over the past 2 years to hopefully prime the pump and show you also how diverse these experiments and the creativity that has been shown through these grants. So let's just start the one that's kind of top center. This was a very small church with an older congregation, and a lot of folks felt like there wasn't much they could do anymore. They didn't quite have the energy or the resources to really make a difference in their community. Well, as they were talking to community leaders, they realized their community had a higher than average number of families involved in the foster care system. And as they talked more, they learned that there were no breaks for these foster care families. They didn't have any respite opportunities or safe places where they could just have a night away and their kids could be cared for and loved on and know that they were in good hands. So this church started a regular, I think it was a Friday or Saturday night, respite care ministry for foster care families. And so this congregation who was older in age, all of a sudden became kind of adopted grandparents to these kids. And they realized, you know what, we can cook for these kids, we can do crafts for them, we can with them, we can love on them and help them to know how much God loves them as well. Um, and then the families who were involved in this ministry had an opportunity to be prayed for and to receive support that they needed. So in thinking about the metrics, so of course and there also I think were some clothing and food options that were provided for these families. So the standard of living, they helped provide some of those physical needs. It was very high in quality of life and community building and providing a place to belong and to get support. Um, but then the kids were also um, taught about Jesus, and the families were prayed for as far as the eternal life. So just again, a little church that didn't see a lot of hope for their future, then had this new revived energy around the one thing that they could do and do well that was a need in their community. The picture below that, this is a church in a metropolitan area where there was a large homeless population, very transient area. And so, in talking with some of the folks involved, the homeless shelter, they learned that they didn't have anybody regularly coming in to provide worship services. So that's how this initiative began, was by offering regular worship services. As they began to talk with the folks who were staying at the shelter, a lot of them were seeking jobs and other opportunities, and they didn't have access to um, business attire or haircuts or things that would help them to take that next step. So they started on Tuesdays barbershop and haircuts, in addition to the worship services that they were offering, um, and where they would counsel and pray with the folks as well. So thinking about this church and their metrics, of course, the standard of living, they were helping with some physical needs. Quality of life, they were building community, but what they didn't realize would happen, and what was another offshoot, was that folks in the surrounding community heard about what they were doing, were really excited, and asked if they could help. So the folks that they were in ministry with at the homeless shelter weren't then coming to their church, but other people in the community were really inspired by what they were doing and wanted to come and see why a church would be doing this work. And so they had some new folks join their church from the community who just wanted to come and be part. The final picture, this is a church in an area where there weren't a lot of activities for kids. And so they had a bunch of land. They started a sports league. And so initially that seemed kind of, again, like a niche thing. It was just for the families or folks who could coach or be part of the sports program. What happened was they realized a lot of these kids weren't getting fed on the weekends. So they started including some meals for the families. As they talked to the parents, they realized a lot of them had hurt when it came to church. They had some trauma from childhood or young adulthood about what it meant to be part of a church, or they were excluded in some way. So they were able, on a soccer field, to be able to have some of those conversations and hear those stories. Some older folks in their church who really didn't think they could contribute much, they encouraged them to bring out their lawn chairs and be the cheerleaders on the sidelines as they got to know these families and these kids. So again, what just started out as a sports ministry expanded to feeding and relationship building, offering devotions before the game started, seeing the gifts and recognizing the gifts in the kids, and and being able to celebrate with them in that way, and providing a safe place for folks who might have been hurt by the church to share those experiences and be provided a different narrative, and hopefully what had been bad news to them, they could see as truly good news and hope. So those are a couple, again, very different initiatives that received grants over the last 2 years. And again, how we're looking at framing how they're evaluating if it's working or not, and how they went about discerning that was something they could do, and how there might have been a gap in the community, and this initiative might help fill that gap. So that did a lot of talking. Hope the questions that you came with were answered, but I'll turn it to Terry right now just to see if there are lingering questions out there, ones that have been asked by multiple folks.
Yeah, a good question I saw was what types of supporting documents are helpful to our team in the application?
Yeah, so one thing with Submittable, we will ask you for a budget. You can either use the template provided or you can upload a spreadsheet. We also give you the opportunity to submit letters of support or recommendation. So if you're partnering with a local agency or something, and you have their recommendation, or if there's somebody in your denomination, if it's like a district superintendent or somebody else that can give you a letter of support, you'll have the opportunity to do that as well. But we basically wanted those values that I shared, want to see those being answered in the body, in the narrative. But really, it's just the financial piece, whether an Excel spreadsheet, or you can use the financial template given in Submittable, and then other supporting documents we'll be happy to read.
Okay. Another one in that same vein of thought is, are there particular endorsements that we prefer?
No, not necessarily. I mean, if your bishop endorses you, but the proposal isn't well developed, it's still probably it's going that isn't going to make up for other elements that are key, that are missing. So again, we want to see the teamwork within the church, that this is something that you've really listened well and are excited and passionate about, that even if you don't get funding, you might do everything you can, because this is something really important. Try to find another way to do it. So no, and we've also awarded grants that didn't have any additional letters of support, but that were very well written.
Okay, so we've gotten several questions about this, but I think you may have covered it briefly. Can the grant funding be used to pay a salary or fund a position?
No. There might be elements. We had one grant this year that was around providing childcare for teacher work days. There weren't any offerings, anything available for working families. And so the person who was a certified teacher, but currently a stay-at-home mom that was helping to coordinate that, there was a little money for stipend for her, but not for a full staff position. It needs to be directly related to expenses for that grant, for that program.
Okay. Another question was, can the grant funding be used for multiple evangelistic projects or programs that a church would undertake?
Yes, but it would need to be part of the same um, overarching initiative, if that makes sense. So I can tell you there's a church that is a grant recipient this year, and their major focus was finding places of connection and belonging for their community. So they did have several events related to that, but it was geared towards the same folks to gather and to help them find a place and to build community. So it kind of, they can be separate events, but they need to build towards this same goal, if that makes sense.
Okay. We had another question. If several churches are working together on an initiative, what tier of the grant would they then be able to apply for?
Yeah, so multiple churches working together can apply for the $10,000 grant.
Okay.
And then
Someone
you would
else,
just decide which church will be the point and handle the finances.
okay. Someone else asked if they're a faith-based Methodist affiliated nonprofit, what tier of grant would they qualify for?
So it depends what the project is, and again, it has to be geared explicitly towards local churches and helping them to do an evangelistic ministry.
Okay.
So it can't just be a separate nonprofit doing their work that's not equipping local churches.
Okay. Somebody else asked, is last year's Zoom recording with recipients of the grant available to be viewed?
The check-in sessions.
Mhm.
So I would need to ask permission. I told them as they were sharing that it was recorded, and I shared it amongst the recipients, but I have not asked and received permission from them to share. We do have on our website several grant stories beyond the ones that I shared today. So would encourage you to go on our social media and our website, and you can read additional stories.
Okay. Is the grant renewable?
No. So if you are a past recipient and you are doing a different or new initiative, you can apply again, but these are 1-year grants.
Okay. I'll just remind everybody to please stay muted so we don't interrupt the meeting. If someone's just started a program in January, is it still eligible for the grant, or would it need to be something new that starts in June?
Yeah, if you're just launching, you could go ahead and apply, but it needs to still be in infancy.
Let's see. Let me see if there are any more that have come through the chat. I think a lot have come through the chat just since we started talking. Can you add to an existing ministry?
Again, it would depend on what that looks like. If you have specific questions about your proposal, feel free to reach out to me, and I can address specifically what you're talking about. Yeah, it would, if it's just making something bigger, maybe not. I would need to know more details. It would need to have a new dimension.
Let's see, can an annual conference apply on behalf of several district or conference churches?
Yes, so that would be a cluster working together. We have a couple districts currently receiving grants for a collaborative effort within a region. What we have moved away for, if it is a district or annual conference looking to provide training, that no longer fits into this category. What we're looking for is initiatives, applications, folks who are ready to launch. And once we finish this section, if you've listened to this and you're like, we have a little more work to do or we're not quite ready, I'll give you some next steps if you fit into that category. But if a district wanted to kind of hold the money for churches in a community who are starting an initiative together, yes, they could apply.
Okay. And I'll answer this. Somebody asked if the recording of this will be available to view. Yes, if you registered, you will all receive an email with the recording, as well as it will be up on our website. We're not gatekeeping this session. It's available for folks to view.
Yes.
Okay, let me look and see. A lot of these are really specific to folks' programs. So like Heather said, if you want to shoot her an email or we can maybe get into a little bit more specifics for that. Let's see. Okay, how is the grant distributed? At one time or monthly?
Yeah, so you will get the full payments at the beginning of the grant cycle.
Okay. Let's see. I think you touched on this, but can the grant funding be used towards updates to the physical property that are necessary to launch the new ministry?
I would need more information. We currently are funding a ministry that is working with special needs populations, and they needed to use some of the funding to make the rooms they were meeting in more accessible, because that was directly related to that ministry, to that project. That worked, that fit the criteria. So I would just need to know specifics. So shoot me an email and we can talk through it.
Okay, let's see. Okay, if a church has more than one initiative that would meet the criteria, could they apply twice in 1 year, knowing that only one could be accepted?
I would work on your strongest proposal and the one that you think could make the most impact. Just again, as
Girl,
somebody,
did you say something for your brother?
Give me just a second.
All right, thanks, Terry.
Yeah.
As someone who has served smaller congregations, it's hard to do multiple initiatives really well. So one of the things we were looking for is what is the one initiative that really could make a big impact on your community that your church again is uniquely gifted for. So I would pick the one that you feel most passionately about and the one that you think would be most transformational.
Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and answer this question. I've seen it a couple times. This is a grant cycle for United States-based programs only.
Yes.
These are not for international programs. Let's see if there's anything else in the Q&A, but I think you've answered most of the questions.
Okay.
Let's see. Yeah, that looks like pretty much the gist of most of the questions that came through.
Yeah, and so we know that a lot of you might not have had a chance to log on to the website yet or to look through the preview of the grant application, and that's fine. So as you look through that, as you try to log on to Submittable and begin the application, let us know if other questions arise. We're happy to help you with that. As I mentioned, I know some of you might have joined this call not exactly sure what the grant was about or what we're looking for. And as I was talking through the requirements, you realize, oh, we're not quite ready. We want to do something, but we're not sure what or how. Want to mention a couple things. The first is on our website. We have several resources, evangelism resources, study guides, videos, things for you to do in small groups. Encourage you to check those out. They're all available for you to download at no cost. So please make use of those. We also, in the next year, will be launching some different training opportunities that will help congregations learn how to articulate and share their faith story, how to listen well to their community, and to figure out what God might be calling them to do and be, in order to then write a grant proposal that would be successful. So if you've listened today and you've thought, oh, we could use some help or some coaching or some training on what might be the thing God is calling us to do, please make sure you're signed up to receive our newsletter and updates. And you can send Terry and me an email that just says we're interested in some training or some additional resources, and we'll get you on a list as we're looking at those opportunities. So again, it's a process to discover exactly how do we effectively engage in evangelism, especially in today's world when no longer people are just coming to us, right? Like, we need to figure out how to build those relationships and find ways that aren't maybe Sunday morning service of what used to be the entry point. So if we can assist you in that way, if you're interested, we're focusing on congregational leadership teams. So this isn't just a continuing ed for the pastor to go off, but we want teams together who are excited to learn and to grow, and for these to be congregational culture shifts that can occur. So follow up. There is my email. Terry, I realize this slide doesn't have yours as well, but it's the same foundationforevangelism.org, but she is T Farmer, and either of us can help you, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. So hope this answered any things that you were thinking as you were coming into today's, that you understand more about the process, that you are familiar with next steps or other ways that we might be able to come alongside you. And just want to thank you for your time. We, as Terry mentioned, this recording will be available. If you want to share it with your other folks in your church, if they have questions, feel free to point them to the recording. Other than that, reach out to us if you have specific questions, and we're here to help. And we're so excited to hear what God is doing and will do through you and through your local churches.